You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I have to start this show off with a sports death that flew under the radar over the weekend. Very understandable with all the unrest that's unfolded over the senseless death of George Floyd. Again, thoughts and prayers go out to him and his family. I understand why people are upset, and I'm upset too. That never, ever should have happened under any circumstances. And, you know, the one thing I'll say is there are people saying, hey, look at Colin Kaepernick. Kaepernick was right. Kaepernick was never wrong. Kaepernick was never wrong to raise the issue of police brutality. It's the way he did it that people had an issue with. The kneeling for the anthem, that was wrong. If you're going to write pigs on your cleats, which is something that Kaepernick did, I can get behind that more than I can the kneeling for the anthem. That's not, protesting the police. There was something, I think it was outside of the Barclays Center, that unfolded that a lot of people gravitated towards. And it's kind of interesting. The police, it may not have been the Barclays Center, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. The police took down the American flag and replaced it with a black and white flag, except with one blue stripe. If the point is that you're gonna support the flag, don't you wanna keep the flag the same? Or at the very least, just string up your flag underneath it? Those people had a point. The Kaepernick stuff was never wrong. It's just the way he did it that was wrong. Come up with another delivery system. Literally anything else. Alright. I'm going down the rabbit hole too much. Let me go back to the death of Roosevelt Rosie Taylor. It's okay if you don't know the name. Played a long time ago in the 1960s. But in the 60s, there were very few better defensive backs in the NFL and maybe all of football. Because remember, the AFL was there too. Than Taylor. He played football at Grambling under the great Eddie Robinson. And in 1960, Grambling won the Southwestern Athletic Conference. They were tied with Prairie View, A&M, and Southern, but still, they were co-SWAC champions. You can't take that away from them. That was the second conference title that they had ever won. And that Grambling team was fantastic with Taylor, Ernie Ladd, Buck Buchanan, Willie Brown. Again, coached by Eddie Robinson, one of the best college football coaches of all time. That was a fantastic team. Yet somehow, Taylor went undrafted. It's really incredible how a guy like that went undrafted, but he did. George Halas took a chance on him, and Taylor almost immediately dominated. In 61, his rookie year, he started 5 games. Pretty good for an undrafted free agent. And in 62, he started 13 games, had 2 picks for 64 yards, and returned 1 to the house. But 1963 was his best year, and the Bears' best year while he was there. Taylor had 9 picks to lead the NFL. He had 3 fumble recoveries, had a 17 approximate value, according to Pro Football Reference. That's insane. And the 63 Bears went on to beat the Giants 14-10 in the NFL championship game. Y.A. Tittle was absolutely atrocious in that game. He threw 5 interceptions. The Giants' running game couldn't get anything going. Joe Morrison was terrible. The Bears' offense wasn't much better. Billy Wade wasn't that good. Ronnie Bull wasn't that good. But the Bears' defense was insane. That really started a string of dominance for Taylor. In 64 and 65, he made second-team All-Pro. 66 and 67, he had a better approximate value, according to Pro Football Reference, than both of those All-Pro years, but didn't make it. 68, he made the Pro Bowl again, somehow wasn't All-Pro. But the Bears just couldn't do anything. After 63, they didn't make the playoffs until 1977. George Halas retired, was replaced by Jim Dooley. Dooley was terrible. Was replaced by Abe Gibron. Gibron was terrible. And they replaced him with Jack Party. Party was good. But still, though, that's 14 years that you're not making the playoffs. That's not good. In 69, the Bears decided to blow things up en route to a 1-13 season. Taylor was sent to the Niners. And he had some good years there. He wasn't great. He then made his way to the Washington Redskins in 72, where he played for George Allen, who was previously with the Chicago Bears in 63. That Redskins team has the distinction of being the last team that the Dolphins beat in their perfect season. The Dolphins beat the Redskins 14-7, and that was when Taylor decided to retire. He went out almost on top. I can't say I blame him. He was one of the best defensive backs in the NFL and maybe all of football in the 60s. He's widely regarded as one of the best Chicago Bears of all time, and rightly so. May he rest in peace. Alright, it's time to start the trifecta by recapping the Jacksonville Jaguars 2020 NFL Draft Class. I've had a lot of people ask me, Jacob, why are you still talking about the draft? It's over a month old. Look, I understand that it's not the most topical of things, but that's the last big sporting event we've had. You know, I'm not a UFC fan. I'll be the first person to tell you I don't know anything about it. I'm not a big golf fan. I didn't watch the match with Mickelson and Woods and Brady and Manning. I'm not a NASCAR fan. I don't even think that's a real sport, to tell you the truth. I know there's a friend of mine who listens to the show, Matt, who's going to kill me for saying that. It's true. It's my opinion. I mean, the NFL Draft is the last big sporting event we've had out of the 4 major sports. I promise you when we get live sports back, I'm going to stop doing this. But this is really the only thing I can do to give you content. And I like doing it. I think it means something to the fans of those teams. So, without further ado, I'm going to get into the Jaguars now. C.J. Henderson was the perfect pick for the Jaguars. In the mock draft that I did with Nick, I had Henderson going 9, but truthfully, I wasn't 100% confident about it. It's the pick I would have made if I was in charge of the Jaguars, but I wasn't 100% sure they were going to do it. I thought they were going to go best player available. That may have been Henderson in their opinion, it may not have been Henderson. Keep in mind, Tristan Wirfs and Jerry Jeudy were still there. Cornerback was by far and away the biggest need, but I didn't know if the Jaguars were going to go that route, but they did, and for their sake, I'm glad they did. Now, I'm not glad as a Jets fan. Henderson was the guy who I really wanted. Jack of all trades, master of some. He's an insanely durable player. He started 27 games at Florida. Fantastic cover skills, fantastic ball skills. I don't give a damn that he's bad in run support. Darrelle Revis. I've said it a million times. I don't want my corners to be good tacklers. If your cornerback is getting a lot of tackles, that's not a good thing. It means he's allowing the catch. I wanted Henderson for the Jets, but he was picked by the Jaguars. It was the right pick. I went 6 for 6 to start off my portion of the mock draft. Nick was perfect through just one pick. He got Chase Young, and that was it. The Giants threw a curveball with Andrew Thomas, and Nick couldn't predict it. So, hey, I was 6 for 6. I was sitting pretty. K'Lavon Chaisson dominated the CFP game against Oklahoma. That was the best game he played all year. And if you're going to ball out, do it in the playoff. Do it on national television with the entire football world watching. That spoke volumes to me. I put a lot of stock into how players play in big games. And that goes for the NBA too. Chaisson is a really smart player, great tackler, good in one-on-one battles, really athletic, good frame. The thing is, he missed almost all of the 2018 season with an injury that scared some teams off. It's why he almost fell out of the top 20. But if he can stay healthy, the Jaguars found themselves a guy who's going to be with them for the next 10 years. Easy. Laviska Shenault is the epitome of how deep this wide receiver draft class was. In any other draft, he would have been a first rounder. I had him as the 42nd best prospect in this draft. Shenault was great at Colorado. Was by far and away their best player. Really good frame, really athletic, plays with a fire under his ass. The thing is, he doesn't have great big playability. He tends to get bullied when he's going up for jump balls. But he's a really good route runner. He has all the talent in the world. You take a look at that Jaguars wide receiver core with Shark, Conley, and now Shenault. That's pretty good. Gardner Minshew has some weapons to play with. I like that. Granted, I'm not sold on Minshew at all, but he has no excuse to not be able to put it all together. Davon Hamilton was a 4th rounder to me, and like a mid to late 4th rounder at that. Every time I watched him play, I just thought he was average. He doesn't do anything great. He's a jack of all trades, master of none. He's the epitome of that. I just don't see a high ceiling with him. He has a very high floor. I think we're going to see him in the league for the next 10 to 15 years. But there's just not a lot there. I don't see a perennial Pro Bowler. I see just a good player, not a great one. I don't hate the pick, but I don't love it either. Ben Bartch was one of my favorite players coming out of this draft, not because of anything he did at St. John's, but because of that weird smoothie that he drank to gain weight. I mean, this is a guy who started as a tight end at 250 pounds. The coaches at St. John's in Minnesota said to him, "We really like your blocking. We don't like your receiving. We want you to switch over to the O-line, but you've got to put on weight." So, every day, Bartch would drink a protein shake consisting of scrambled eggs. Wikipedia says cottage cheese. I watched Bartch put this thing together at the NFL Combine on TV, and he didn't use cottage cheese. Maybe it's optional. I don't know. I like cottage cheese. Cottage cheese and cantaloupe is amazing. Instant grits, peanut butter, bananas, and Gatorade. At the Combine, Bartch used red Gatorade, for whatever it's worth. And evidently it's not that bad. I mean, I don't know how all those things would taste blended up and together, but, I mean, all those ingredients I like. And it worked. Bartch was tipping the scales at over 300 pounds. He's a good kid, very athletic, has a good head on his shoulders. The people at St. John's of Minnesota raved about him. The thing is, he played at St. John's of Minnesota. And, look, admittedly, I did not know this until Bartch came along, that the Minnesota Intercollegiate Athletic Conference existed. That's where St. John's plays. I had no idea that was a thing. I mean, you take a look at the schools there, I've never heard of any of them. He's also very raw. He's not going to be able to start week 1, but you give him a chance to learn, and he keeps drinking those protein shakes. There's no reason why he can't develop into a solid player. I like Bartch. I have no problem with the Jaguars taking a chance on him in the 4th round. That fit his range perfectly to me. Josiah Scott has a great nickname. He's called the Gnat because he's pesky, he's persistent, you can't get away from him. Admittedly, I didn't know that until I looked it up. Shout out to NFL.com. But you know what? It works. I like that nickname. That's a very fitting nickname. He's a ball hawk. He's a guy who you're not going to be able to shake very easily. He's very athletic. His best game to me was against Penn State. NFL.com mentions this, and I agree with them 100%. He shadowed KJ Hamler all game, and Hamler was terrible. The thing is, he has a lot of injury concerns. He missed the first 8 games of 2018 because of meniscus surgery. He doesn't have a great frame. He got hurt a little bit last year. Had to leave a couple games. But if he can stay healthy, The Jaguars have a potential 1-2 punch in Henderson and Scott that should be lethal. It'll make Jaguars fans forget about A.J. Bouye. Shaq Quarterman was one of Miami's best players last year. I have a friend who's a big fan of the U, so I sorta kinda follow him in a roundabout way. He jumped off the tape, consistently looked like one of their best players. The thing is, though, when you project him to the next level, he's not that great. He doesn't have a great frame at just 6 foot and 234 pounds. I'm not sure if he can play on third down. He's not the smartest player in the world. He's not a great tackler. I had a 6th round grade on him. To take him in the compensatory part of the 4th round was really, really bad to me. I wasn't crazy about that pick. Daniel Thomas, to me, profiled as a 7th rounder, or maybe a late 6th. He's a special teamer. That's all he is. That's the only way he's going to be able to produce in the NFL. The Jaguars desperately needed a safety because they traded Jalen Ramsey. They didn't replace him with Thomas. He's just going to be able to play on special teams. And I'm not even sure if he's going to be a great special teamer. He has a good frame for it. He's athletic enough to be a gunner, but I'm not crazy about that pick. There were plenty of better routes that the Jaguars could have gone. And the same thing with Colin Johnson. Leave it to the Jaguars, one of the most dysfunctional organizations in the NFL, to find one of the few wide receivers that I wasn't crazy about. There were a lot of people that were higher on Colin Johnson than me. ESPN had a 4th round grade on him. I was more in the late 5th round range. I understand that that's where Johnson was picked, and it fits his range. I'm not saying it doesn't, but there were better wide receivers available. I mean, guys like Quintez Cephas and Donovan Peoples-Jones, James Prochet, KJ Hill. I mean, they were all better than Johnson. This is a guy with big injury concerns. He had a hamstring injury that knocked him out of some games last year. He didn't run at the combine because of a hip injury. Those are major red flags to me. Now, I like that he was a team captain, and his skills do project well to the next level, but the injury concerns just terrify me. And also, last year at Texas, I expected more from him, and he just didn't do that. I wanted Johnson to dominate all year at Texas. He didn't do it. If he can stay healthy, he's going to be a solid player, but I'm not convinced that he can. Jake Luton is a solid guy to take a chance on in the 6th round. I mean, the Jaguars did it with Minshew, and so far it's sort of kind of worked out. Luton's another guy with a terrible injury history. I mean, he spent 6 years in college because he had so many injuries. And at Oregon State last year, he didn't play that well. His accuracy isn't where it needs to be. He's not that athletic. He doesn't have a great arm. I like his frame. He's a tall quarterback, 6'6". But I'm just not convinced he has what it takes to be a solid NFL player. Maybe as a backup, he can get there. But he's going to need a lot of seasoning. He's going to need to stay healthy. That's the biggest thing. The Jaguars took a lot of chances on injury-prone players. I'm not crazy about that. This is a boom or bust draft for them. Tyler Davis grew up not that far from me, so I was following him kind of closely. I like the fact that he was named team captain at Georgia Tech. That does mean a lot to me. He has an okay frame, okay speed, okay hands as a blocker, but that's just it. He's an okay player. You know, I wanted to like him so much, and maybe, just maybe, he can stick around, but I'm just not sure if it's there. He's got a lot of work to do when it comes to route running and aggression. Sometimes I just want my tight ends to get in there and just maul the defender. He doesn't do that. Uses his hands too much. I don't like that. Chris Claybrooks is going to be a really good kicker punt returner in this league for a long time. He's really small. He's not going to be able to contribute as a corner. I mean, he's the same height as me at 5'9". He has great speed, but he's just so blasted raw that unless you're willing to work with him, I'm not sure he's going to be able to get there. I think he's going to focus more on his special teams than he is his cornerback play. The talent is there for Claybrooks to be a good corner, but I just don't see it happening. I think he's going to be more of a kick or punt returner in the NFL, and a damn good one at that. This fit his range to me as a 7th rounder. That was a great pick. All in all, I really like what the Jaguars did in some respects. Taking Henderson was a great pick. Laviska Shenault makes that Jaguar wide receiver core scary. Ben Bartch is a great kid. And there is some logic to betting on the injury-prone players. If they can stay healthy, you've got really good players. But if they can't, they're just not going to contribute. There's too much room for error in this draft class for me to give the Jaguars anything better than a B. It's not a bad draft, it's just not a great draft. I think a B is very fair. Alright, it's time for this day in sports history. On this day, in 2012, one of the best moments in recent Mets history occurred as Johan Santana pitched the first and so far only no-hitter in Mets history. The reason I'm talking about this is because there's a notion that has gone around for a long time, ever since that no-hitter, that Terry Collins ruined Santana's career for just that one game. And he used to regret it for a long time. But I don't think that was the wrong decision to leave Santana in there. Before I get too far into it, let me give you a brief synopsis. You probably remember this, but just let me do it really quickly. Santana was one of the best pitchers in baseball for a period of time from 2004 to really 2010. He dominated. Then in 2011, he missed the whole season with anterior capsule surgery that he had on his throwing arm. Santana came back in 2012 and pitched really well up to and including that no-hitter. before the no-hitter, Santana was 2-2 with a 3 ERA and 55 strikeouts. Now, I don't like the win-loss record, but the Mets just weren't hitting for him. Big surprise. Fast forward to June 1st, and I remember watching this game. The Yankees were blowing out the Tigers. They were up 5-1 midway through the second inning. The Tigers kept it close, but you just had the sense that the Yankees were going to win that game. I don't remember what was going on in hockey and basketball, but I got the news on Twitter. At least I think it was Twitter. I'm pretty sure it was Twitter. I don't know where else I would have gotten it. Maybe Facebook, but I think it was Twitter. That Santana was pitching a no-hitter, and he was like 9 outs away from it. So, I live in New York. I understand the significance of it. The Mets have been around for 50 years at that point, and had never pitched a no-hitter. And they traded Nolan Ryan for Jim Fregosi. Ryan with 7 no-hitters, none of them as a Met. So I turned on the game. With 8 outs to go, Yadier Molina hits this shot to left field. I mean, it's a rocket. Baxter plays it perfectly, catches it, but goes stumbling into the left field wall. He ends up needing to be replaced, and he ended up on the DL right after that game. It's one of the best catches to save a no-hitter in baseball history. Fast forward to the 8th inning, and Santana started with 107 pitches. He gets Tyler Green to fly out right away, so he's at 108. Shane Robinson makes him throw 5 pitches, but strikes out. 113. Rafael Furcal draws a walk. 118, and then Carlos Beltran lines out to the second baseman, Daniel Murphy. That puts Santana's total at 122. This is a guy who was out the year before with surgery on his throwing arm. Terry Collins faced a gut-wrenching decision. It was not easy. Believe me, I remember it. I was watching SNY. They were showing the Mets dugout. But you could tell Santana wanted to be in there. Collins didn't want to pull his pitcher who was dealing to put in Frank Francisco to preserve that no-hitter, or Bobby Parnell, or whoever he was going to put in. That bullpen was terrible. Big surprise. So Collins left Santana in. It was the right decision. It was the decision I would have made. I remember watching it. I was screaming at the television, leave him in. Leave him in. And I wasn't saying this as a Yankee fan. I wanted him to throw a no-hitter. I was rooting for him. It's an easy story to get behind. I'm one of those Yankees fans that hates the Mets, but for one game, I was rooting for him. Santana gets Matt Holliday to fly out to the center fielder. That center fielder was Andres Torres, who had come into the game to replace Baxter, but he went into center, and Kirk Neuenhuis, the starting center fielder, moved over to left. So Torres got the putout. Alan Craig flew out to Neuenhuis, and Santana got David Freese to strike out on his 134th pitch. Everyone is going nuts. It's the first no-hitter that the Mets have ever thrown. I was happy. I mean, if you go 50 years without throwing a no-hitter, man, that's tough. That's really, really tough. But give Santana credit. He was able to do it. But then the wheels fell off. Collins skipped Santana's start, moved him back to face the Yankees at Yankee Stadium. I think I remember the game. Santana was terrible, gave up 6 runs in 5 innings. He was never the same after the no-hitter. He went from having a 3 ERA to finishing the season with a 4.85 ERA. After the no-hitter, his record was 3-7 with an 8.27 ERA and 43 strikeouts. He was terrible. The no-hitter took a lot out of him. But it was the right decision to leave him in. You have to do it. I mean, no one could foresee that Santana would fall off a cliff that much. This guy's a professional. Yeah, he's coming back from an injury, but he knows his body better than anyone. This is a guy who was one of, if not the best pitcher in baseball at one point. He wasn't there anymore, but he was still great. It looked like he was going to go back to dominating. And if Santana says to you, hey, Skip, I want to go back in there, I want to finish this, how do you pull him? Especially when you've gone 50 years without throwing a no-hitter as a franchise. I don't want to say that combined no-hitters have asterisks, because they don't. But it's kind of tough when you're a starter and you get pulled after 7 innings and you're throwing a no-hitter, or 8 innings and you're throwing a no-hitter. I mean, how do you do that? I mean, I remember, I think it was last year, or maybe it was the year before, but I think it was last year, the Angels had a combined no-hitter with an opener. In 2004, the Houston Astros bullpen no-hit the Yankees. In hindsight, was it the wrong decision to leave him in? Probably. But at the time, no, it wasn't. Should Collins regret that decision? You really shouldn't live in hindsight. If you live in hindsight, you're going to end up with so many regrets and you're going to end up beating yourself up. It's not worth it. After the 2012 season, Santana never pitched in the majors again. It's fair to wonder if Santana had been pulled after 7, if he would have continued his dominance, and if he'd have had a better case for being in the Hall of Fame. I know Tom Van Riper thinks he should, and I can certainly make the argument for it. But, I mean, this is a guy who finished with just 139 wins and less than 2,000 strikeouts. It's tough to put that kind of player in the Hall of Fame. I understand peak years. And look, from 2004 to 2010, Santana was great. That's 7 great years. You can put a player in the Hall of Fame for that, but I'm not crazy about putting in a guy with less than 200 wins and 2,000 strikeouts. I can make the argument for it, but I can make the argument against it. But in all seriousness, Tom, that was a great interview. One of the best interviews in the history of this show. It was long, but it was really good. Alright, it's time for a hockey Mount Rushmore. This is the second Mount Rushmore with hockey that I've ever done. I did the Islanders as the second one I ever did. I went Yankees, Islanders, Jets, Nets, and then I did all the baseball teams. So now we're on to hockey. And the first team alphabetically is the Anaheim Ducks. A team that's always been really easy to root for with Teemu Selanne and Paul Kariya. Kariya ends up leaving for the Avalanche. It's Selanne's team in 2007. The Ducks put a great core around him. Solani's by far and away their best player. And with a core of him, Andy McDonald, Scott Niedermayer, Chris Kunitz, Chris Pronger, a young Ryan Getzlaf, a young Dustin Penner, a young Corey Perry, and Jean-Sébastien Giguère as the goalie, they were able to win the Stanley Cup. Then Solani takes a step back. He's still really good, but he's not great. The team becomes Getzlaf's, Perry's, and Ryan's. Bobby Ryan gets sent to the Senators. Solani retires. There's a new core that takes over, led by Getzlaf and Perry. Jacob Silverberg came over in the Bobby Ryan trade and looked really good immediately. Ryan Kessler came over from the Canucks. John Gibson and Frederik Andersen were there. Then Andersen gets traded to the Leafs, and it's Gibson's team. Gibson plays really well. The Ducks have always been an easy team to root for. The correct Mount Rushmore is, in case you couldn't figure out who number one is going to be, Teemu Solani, Ryan Getzlaf, Jean-Sébastien Giguère, and Corey Perry. Very tough to leave Paul Kariya off this list. You can certainly make the argument for him, but Kariya only spent 9 years with the Ducks. Solani, Getzlaf, and Perry were there for much longer. Perry was there for 14 years. Solani and Getzlaf were there for 15 years. Giguère was only there for 9 years, I understand that, but he was the goalie of the Stanley Cup winning Ducks. You're going to get the edge in that case. Solani was always massively underrated, but would constantly put up 40-goal seasons. Played a very gentlemanly game, didn't play a physical game, but when you're the star, you don't need to be physical. You have people who are physical for you. Ryan Getzlaf is really close to overtaking Solani for most points by a Duck. Solani has 988 points, Getzlaf has 965. So next year, Getzlaf will overtake him. He was the best player on the 14-15 and 16-17 Ducks that made it to the Western Conference Finals. Getzlaf is obviously second. Jean-Sébastien Giguère was one of the best goalies in the NHL when he was with the Ducks. In 2003, he won the Conn Smythe Trophy as the losing goalie. Just think about how dominant he had to be the Conn Smythe winner as the losing goalie. It didn't go to Martin Brodeur, it went to Giguère. And then in 2007, Giguère backstops the Ducks to the Stanley Cup. He was insane in that playoffs. For the most part, Corey Perry was the Robin to Getzlaf's Batman, except in the 10-11 season when Perry won the Maurice Richard Trophy by scoring 50 goals and by winning the Hart Trophy. But for the most part, he was the second guy, was always a great player, but couldn't be the best player on a team that went really far. I like Perry a lot, but he just wasn't better than Getzlaf. It was really close between him and Kariya, the two Robins. Ultimately, I went with Perry because he was there longer. Tomorrow, you'll probably get more of the same. Hopefully not a death, but definitely the trifecta. Hopefully we get some positive baseball news. I didn't talk about it because I spoke about it last week. Until tomorrow, I am Jacob Valk saying, that teams couldn't prepare for me in batting practice because they couldn't find anyone who threw as slow as me.